Well, good evening. Welcome to the July edition of Sky Views, brought to you by the New Jersey State Museum Planetarium. I'm Bill Murray, planetarium technician at the planetarium. Let's take a look at some of the interesting sights visible in our warm July skies this year. Well, normally here at Sky Views, we like to give you an evening where you can get out and get a nice view of the moon and the planets with your unaided eye. And this month is no exception. However, to see some of the sights visible this evening, a pair of binoculars would be helpful. You don't need a big pair of binoculars, a small pair will do. We're currently looking towards the west on the evening of July 20th. It's about 9:15 p.m., which is about 30 to 40 minutes after the sun has gone down. And as you can see in our planetarium view here, the sky is still well lit up with twilight. So many of the objects visible may require the help of binoculars in order to be able to see them. One thing that you should be able to see with your unaided eye, just above our western horizon, is the planet Venus, which is the closest planet to us here on the Earth. You shouldn't have any trouble seeing Venus. Venus is actually visible in the daytime skies if you know exactly where to look. And a half hour after sunset, it should be a bright glowing beacon just above our western horizon. So once you've located Venus, if you have those binoculars, you can center them on Venus and scan upwards, and you should be able to see the crescent moon. The moon this evening is a few days after new, and once you've located it, you should be able to find it with your unaided eye. And once you've located both the moon and Venus, you can use them as guideposts to find the other objects visible in our western skies this evening. So about halfway in between the moon and Venus is the bright star Regulus, one of the brighter first magnitude stars, and the brightest star in the constellation of Leo, the Lion, a springtime constellation that's now setting in the west in our July skies here in New Jersey. If you go back to the moon with your binoculars and scan a little bit to the left, you should see a bright orangish-looking star. That's the planet Mars. Much dimmer than Venus, though, but should be easy to pick out in binoculars. Mars and Venus are both in their last weeks of visibility here in New Jersey. They're both setting into the west and will reappear in our morning skies over the coming months. And if you had good luck in locating Venus, the moon, and Mars, and Regulus, if you go back to Venus again and scan a bit to the right, if you are lucky, you may be able to see the planet Mercury. Mercury should be a bit brighter than Mars and should be easy to pick out in binoculars. All of these objects will become much more visible as the sky darkens as time goes on, but they're also setting. So if you're interested and the skies are clear on the evening of July 20th and you have a good low western horizon, get out with a pair of binoculars and see if you can see the planetary traffic jam that's happening that evening with Venus, the star Regulus, the moon, the planet Mars, and the planet Mercury. We've now moved a bit later in time to about 10:40 p.m., also on the evening of July 20th. And we're looking towards the south, towards one of the most iconic constellations of the summer, the constellation of Scorpius, the Scorpion. Scorpius is one of the most easily recognizable constellations, with its asterism of bright stars that resemble a bent fishhook, along with the constellation of Sagittarius, which is just to its east over here. We'll have more to say about that in a month or so. Sagittarius and Scorpius both span the summer Milky Way and are two of the southernmost of the zodiacal constellations. In mythology, the constellations of Scorpius and Orion are linked. It was said that Orion was a giant and was the most successful hunter on Earth back in ancient times, and he boasted that he could slay any creature on the earth. The Greek gods were not fond of people who were boastful, and so they sent the scorpion to sting him in the foot and kill him. And Both of those figures were put into the sky as constellations, but in opposite parts of the sky. So Orion is a winter constellation. You get to see it during the winter months. And as Orion sets in the late spring, Scorpius rises. So they're never in the sky at the same time. Scorpius is seen during the summer months, and Orion is seen during the winter months. The constellation of Scorpius is one of the oldest known constellations. It was known as a scorpion to the Babylonians more than 5,000 years ago, and also as a scorpion to the Greeks back in ancient times. But the Greeks had a more expansive view of the constellation than we do today. As you can see in our graphic here, the constellation that is just to the west of the constellation of Scorpius is the constellation of Libra, the Scales. That's a more recent addition as a constellation. Originally, the Greeks believed that the stars that may now make up the constellation of Libra were the claws of the scorpion. It wasn't until the Romans came along in about the 1st century AD that they decided that there should be 12 constellations of the zodiac, and so they broke off the stars that made up the scorpion's claw and formed them into the constellation we now know of as Libra, the Scales. We can see the record of that history if we take a look at the names of the stars in the constellations that we see today. The names of the stars that we have today have a very interesting path. Originally, the stars were named by the Egyptian Greek astronomer Ptolemy, who lived in the 1st century AD, according to their position in the constellation figures. Ptolemy's work was translated into Arabic by Arabic astronomers about the year 1000, and then made its way to Europe, where corruptions of those Arabic names resulted in the star names that we have today. So if you take a look at the two brightest stars in the constellation of Libra, those stars are Zubin-Eshamali and Zubin-el-Janumi, which have to be the two of my favorite names for stars in the nighttime sky. If you translate Zubin-Eshamali, it translates to the northern claw, and Zubin-el-Janubi translates to the southern claw. So what do claws have to do with the constellation of the Scales? Nothing, because originally these two stars were the claws of the constellation of Scorpius, the scorpion. The brightest star in the constellation of Scorpius is the red giant star Antares. In Greek, Antares means rival of Mars. It was given that name because it has an orangish tint, similar to that of the planet Mars. You can compare those when the star and the planet are close together in the sky. Right now they are in the sky together, but Mars is setting in the west while Antares is rising in the east. Antares is a red supergiant star. These are stars about between 10 and 40 times the mass of the Sun that are old in the last stages of their life. They have expanded out to enormous distances. So as shown in this graphic here, if Antares was placed where the Sun currently is, its outer surface would extend past the orbit of Mars. So it would completely swallow the planets Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars in our solar system. And some of the parts of its chromosphere would actually extend out past Jupiter, and that makes Antares much, much more larger than our star, the Sun. It's interesting to note that the two brightest examples of red supergiant stars that we can see from here on Earth are Antares in the constellation of Scorpius and Betelgeuse in the constellation of Orion. As I said earlier, two constellations that are linked in mythology. Well, that's a brief look at some things visible in our July skies this year. Hopefully the weather will be clear here, and you can get a chance to get out and try to find some of them for yourselves. So from all of us here at the New Jersey State Museum Planetarium, till next month, clear skies.